we all know you want to serve. We all know that this is motherhood and apple pie. You know what I mean? We know all that. So what we really want you guys to do is sort of stick to what are the policy issues that really matter that we should care about. And I think with that, let's start with you, Gene, and we'll go from there, okay? And just give us a sort of 1 minute, real quick, why you're running, what are the policy issues that really concern you, that we should be attuned to,
Well, I know you want to address the policy issue, but a large part of me is, the reason why I wondered, is my whole life of being a servant leader, giving back to community. In 2009, I was selected as the Citizen of the Year.
That's what?
I was honored to be selected as Brentwood Citizen of the Year. So I understand you want to do a policy, but that's the major reason I'm running. Just that my life has been dedicated to being a servant leader approach, to be both civically and educationally.
Okay, you're going to have to speak up. I'm sorry.
Both,
I got a fan going and everything
right.
else. Yeah.
Servant leader. I've been a trusted leader both civically and educationally for 22 years in Brentwood. As far as policies, another reason why I'm running is we have a general plan update that is coming, and that's going to be real critical for all of us to make sure that as we build out our city, that we have quality development that takes place. Another issue I'm concerned about is our fire protection district. We did receive a $7.8 million FEMA grant. However, that's just for 2 years, so there's some heavy work to be done the next 2 years to try to see how we deal with the economic uncertainties that we're facing in the next few years, and how we deal with that in providing public safety, but also living within our means. Also, I'm concerned about the north end of Brentwood. It needs to be revitalized. We've diverted a lot of money to our downtown area in recent years, and I think we've forgotten our north end of Brentwood. And I'm concerned about the citizens there and having some revitalization for them as well. And as most candidates, we're concerned about getting high-paying jobs into our area, as well as our downtown businesses. Getting businesses in, we have a lot of empty buildings downtown Brentwood. We have a beautiful downtown now, a lot of money put in, but we're lacking the businesses. So we need to provide some incentives to get some businesses there.
Wow.
What was the question again?
Why you are running in terms of policy issues? What are the policy issues you want to see addressed?
Okay, I'm an 8-year council member. Sat in the original general plan. I agree with Gene that the general plan update coming up is really important. We're a little behind in getting that done, mainly because of everything that's happened in the last couple of fiscal years. Probably the most important policy issue is the sustainability of the city 20 years from now, maybe 25 when we get to build out. The general plan will be important on the update of determining what kind of businesses need to be in town and the proper mix. After that, I think that we need to be looking at, well, actually, really, it's the financial part, because even though we're a financially sound city, there are pension liability issues. There are a lot of issues with basically sustainability. I know I'm going around and around. North Brentwood, we lost redevelopment funds. It's unfortunate in that case, so we're having to find a new way to take care of that. That's probably the last part of our city that needs to be developed, or redeveloped rather, even though we don't have redevelopment. So those are probably the two major, along with keeping our public safety. We've got a pretty strong police force. We're fully staffed, and which is really nice. But fire is going to be an issue that indirectly actually directly will be affecting us.
So you came on in 04?
04.
Am I correct that by then the pension changes are already made?
Pardon me?
The pension changes had already been made by then?
No.
3 at 50?
Oh, they had already been made, yes.
The increased ones.
The increased ones
were
not
made.
the one, not the greater contribution.
First phase.
The first
Yeah, they were
phase.
made well before.
Yeah, okay. Carissa?
Well, I became involved with the city council about a year ago, a year and a half ago, when we were discussing putting the big box store Walmart in Brentwood. And I just, that combined with the devastation that our businesses, our small businesses have seen, and the high home foreclosure rate that we've seen, just really compelled me to get involved. I feel like we need to be very focused on attracting the right demographic to Brentwood and the right businesses to Brentwood. I'd love to see us adopt a vision.
Attracting the right demographic, what do you mean by that?
A demographic that is inherently interested in protecting our community and caring for our community. So my idea is I would like to see the city adopt a green, sustainable agenda, become the greenest, most sustainable city in the United States. And that's a large vision and may seem unattainable right now, but we've done a lot of things to start that vision already. If you go ahead with this vision, you bring in a demographic that is bound to environmental stewardship, therefore concerned about their community, and you bring in businesses that are also concerned about the community and the world in which they work and operate. So, high on my list of priorities are high-paying jobs, keeping our town safe, having adequate police staffing. I know Bob tells us that the police are fully staffed, but when I went on the ride-along, what the police told me that they would like to see more staff first and foremost. They want more police on the street.
Is there a police department in the United States of America that doesn't want more staff?
I'm sure everybody wants more staff. I mean,
Everyone I've ever been around wants
that's
more
reality.
staff.
But when you take it from a community perspective, I'm just your average wife, mom, nurse. I am in this to protect my community. So I look at safety as a high top priority. I mean, I don't know any mother that won't uproot her family if she perceives her community being endangered. So police staffing is high on my priority list.
So should that be an open-ended checkbook, or I mean?
Well, heavens no.
It's
I mean,
absolutely
you
true
have to balance
that
your
you have
budget.
exactly the same number of cops that you had on the street 6 years ago, which is pretty remarkable considering the downturn. You're probably about the 7th or 8th city we've done so far on a long list.
With a lesser population too.
Pardon?
Smaller population.
Smaller population, but I'm saying relatively speaking, you have the same amount of cops you had 5-6 years ago. Most cities have fewer. Sure, they'd like more, but
absolutely, the bottom line is very important. We have to keep our city's budget balanced. I'm not pie in the sky, but I do think that if we're going to prioritize money, we need to prioritize it to our community's safety. As a mother, that's my concern.
So you'll be prepared to tell us where you're going to cut, right?
Well, what the mayor has let me know is that our city's budget is perfectly balanced, that we actually have surplus, and that there's no reason why we shouldn't look at hiring extra police. That's from Bob Taylor.
You may have wanted to sit through the last session. You may not before you. Yeah.
Did he change his mind?
Well, we'll save that for later.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, Chris.
Yeah, I was a prior council member from 2006 to 2010. I'd like to get back on the council because I think that there are a few priorities and policy issues that need to be dealt with. One is obviously the general plan update. We're scheduled to go to build out at 75,000. That was reduced previously from 95,000. Question is, we can talk about the general plan and build out. The issue is, what are we going to do in the interim, because there's limited development going on right now, and unless we start seeing a turnaround by the banks, I'm not sure we're going to see a whole lot in the future.
Is that good or bad?
I think that that's not necessarily good. It's bad in the sense that the budget is built on a certain amount of building that needs to take place in the future. Whether it needs to be more or not is another issue. I know that there's a significant number of people out there who want to limit our growth at this point to what we have.
The budget is built on a certain amount of building that needs to take place in the future.
Correct.
Usually city budgets like that, I mean, I'm trying to understand, there's one-time developer fees, which should go for one-time costs. And beyond that, the general assumption is that development doesn't usually pay its way, right, in the incremental cost versus the incremental income, right? I mean, that's the general post-Prop 13 way of thinking. Yeah, I mean, if you want to argue with that, I'm open to that. But I'm not sure I follow your reasoning that because right now the model is built on a certain amount of funding, that if that funding doesn't come through, that's because that necessarily you're worse off, because your demand for services will be less too.
Our 10-year plan is based upon a certain amount of development in the future.
Yeah.
If that development does not take place, then it's going to have an impact on the budget.
Yes, it will, but is that a positive or negative?
Well, it's a negative if you're trying to operate a city and pay all your expenses of operating.
But would not your expenses be down too if you have a smaller population?
Some of them, but also development doesn't necessarily mean one-time fees. Development also means an ongoing property tax revenue that wouldn't occur. And if you have based your budget on a certain amount of that increase and it doesn't occur, then you're going to have some budget issues you need to deal with, which is going to have to be responded to. That was simply my point on that. I'm not.
But you heard my question, right?
No, I
mean, because I addressed that issue in my question back to you, right? I mean, right, we understand they're one-time fees.
Correct.
Right, for one-time costs.
Correct.
And then you have ongoing property tax revenues.
Right.
And the argument is that they don't really cover the marginal cost of the increased services demanded. So it's not at all clear the development pays its way. I mean, are you taking issue with that? I'm trying to understand the underlying rationale for the argument.
I think that we have done a pretty good job of making sure that our development covers the ongoing costs. Now, keep in mind that the one big exception to that is the fire district, which is not strictly under the city of Brentwood's control.
Right.
We occupy 4 of the 9 seats on the board. That's a major hole in the whole safety aspect of the city that we're going to have to deal with in the future. And, you know, quite frankly, the fire district budget revenue source is fundamentally and fatally flawed, and it's going to have to be dealt with. The next issue that I think also needs to be dealt with in terms of, I agree, the elimination of redevelopment also put a critical hole in the ability of cities to respond to blight in their community. Now, Brentwood is a newer community, so we don't tend to have as much blight as other areas. I agree that the north portion of Brentwood needs some help, and a lot of that got swept away when redevelopment was eliminated. The city is going to have to figure out how to develop funds to be able to put into infrastructure to allow the development and improvement of that area to take place. In terms of moving forward, we have completed a significant amount of improvements downtown, the whole Civic Center project. We now need to worry about getting businesses to reoccupy that area down there. It's starting, but it's a slow process and it's tough to deal with the economy as bad as it is. We have a lot of residents in the city who are very, very concerned about the value of their properties, and they're feeling like they're trapped in their homes because their ordinary method of financing an improvement to their lifestyle typically was equity from their home or money from their pension plans, which are, you know, both gone. So we need to work at devising a way to get those property values back up so that our residents feel more secure and less locked into their current houses.
Well, building more homes isn't gonna push those property values back up, but we can come back to that. Eric? I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm forgetting supply and demand.
You're putting words in my mouth.
Okay, I'm not putting words in your mouth, I'm just trying to, I'm just trying to understand this, we can come back to that. Okay, Eric?
I think everybody's touched on it a little bit, but obviously the general plan is going to be a guiding factor in how policy is created on this next council.
The general plan, okay.
The general plan. And so that's going to be a big portion of what we spend some time on. As far as some policy decisions and priorities that I've had in the past, is infrastructure, public safety, fiscal sustainability.
Infrastructure, public safety.
Fiscal sustainability.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Not in any particular order, because you can't do anything without fiscal sustainability. So I guess that obviously raises itself to the top. We've been fortunate enough to not have to cut public safety as far as the police department is concerned in the last 6 and 7 years. We haven't had an increase in sworn officers since 2004, and we have a fiscal model that doesn't anticipate any new hires in the next 10 years. Obviously, that's not going to happen. You can't protect a community with the 62 sworn guys at 47,000 people and think that you can do the same amount of protection at 65,000 people. That's what it's going to be in 10 years. And we all don't know what the growth rate is going to be. We've taken
a lot of cities are arguing, for 1 to 1,000 ratio is what the gold standard is. It sounds like you fit it.
I don't know what the gold standard is, and I think it's tough to try to pin cops per population just because the demographics of all the different communities that we have.
And are you going to grow 15,000 people in the next 10 years?
I don't know what our growth rate's going to be in the next 10 years.
Okay.
A lot of it depends on how many new homes are built. Last year we budgeted for 100 and we got 173. I think for the next 10 years, we have approximately 2,000 homes built into the fiscal model. Will we get to the 2,000 homes or will we not? I don't know what that's going to be. But we're about 1.5% to a 2% population increase. So I think we're going to continue to see more people coming into our community, which I think is a good thing. Hopefully some of those people bring jobs with them and companies with them. I think one of our strengths is the demographics that we currently have. The planning that has currently been done. We're continuing to work on the infrastructure, and infrastructure takes a very broad base of what it is. The bypass, Highway 4, getting Bart to Hillcrest, and just allowing that flow of traffic. We've talked about redevelopment agencies. We've talked about North Brentwood struggling. I think it's been an orphan in the past, and I think it continues to be an orphan. I think that there was priorities put in place in previous councils that forced it to be an orphan, and it wasn't concentrated on. Is that good or bad? I think that's up to the people to decide whether it's good or bad. I have my opinion on it, and I think it should have been concentrated on a little bit more.
Any other issues that we...
Fiscal sustainability has been, and I think will be, our single largest challenge in the future. We have yet, as municipalities throughout this state, and I think throughout this nation, and whether it's municipalities or counties or states or our federal government, agreed to sit down and deal with the debts that we've accumulated. And the simple fact that we've refused to put them on our balance sheets, the simple fact that we've continued not to fully fund them, I think is kicking the can down the road. I think it needs to be dealt with. The employees need to understand that if we're going to promise them something, they have to make us as politicians pay for it. Otherwise, some point in the future, they're not going to have it. I think case in point is Stockton. I don't know how that's going to turn out. I don't think anybody knows how it's going to turn out. But I think that going through that process is a good example of what we don't want to happen here. And so if we're gonna promise something, I think we need to have the ability to pay for that promise as we go along and not accumulate a liability and let somebody else deal with it down the road.
Okay. Okay, let's separate this out. Let's do the growth stuff first, and then we're gonna do the sustainability issues second.
And one comment that I'd like to clarify is on our budget, we don't have a surplus. Our expenses are higher than our revenues, and that's the case for the next 7 years. We use a savings account to help balance it, so we have a balanced budget, but I think a sustainable balanced budget, your revenues have to be higher than your expenses.
In the long run, but in the short run,
Over a
the
period,
funds were set up to cover.
over the
that
period of
short
time
run.
that you're gonna look at.
Correct, I understand.
Okay, what I'd like you each to do is give me like a 1 minute, no more answer. On the general.
1 minute?
No more than 1 minute, okay? I mean, I really want you to just cut to it. I need to understand. As you look at the general plan going forward, is the priority housing? Is it business? Does the city need more housing? And does it need more business? Start with you.
I think the priority for the general plan is sustainability, and first fiscal sustainability.
Well,
And how
we'll
housing
come-
and how housing and commercial plays into that sustainability aspect. Do I think we need more density? I don't think we need more density. Do I think we need more housing? I don't necessarily agree that we need to try to squeeze more units in what we currently have. Commercial,
You answered my question by not answering my question. So,
is your question to add more housing
do you
to
need more housing?
to
Do
the
you need-
next general plan?
What is the priority going forward? Is it more housing? Is it more commercial? And do you need more housing and do you need more commercial?
Than what is currently in the general plan?
Than where you currently are today.
Is your question are the two out of balance? Or is your question expanding the urban limit line?
No, my question is not expanding the urban limit. Is there anyone here who wants to expand the urban limit line? Do you want to expand the urban limit?
I think at a certain point, it's logical that that urban limit line is going to get adjusted. At what point in time that happens, I think that people are going to tell us at what point in time that happens. Obviously, Measure F was a test on that urban limit line. There was one before that on the other side of town. The one on the other side of town failed narrowly. The one on Measure F failed a little bit of a wider margin. I think Brentwood's been a community or an agricultural-based community for a long time. It's not necessarily the driver in the community.
Okay, I'm
by
asking.
far.
I want
But-
short answers, okay? And I'm gonna, okay, I want to know real quickly from folks, because we're not gonna get through this if we do 3-minute answers to every question. Is there anyone else, are you saying that you would like to see the urban limit line expanded or not?
No.
Are you saying that?
No.
Maybe.
Okay.
So, Measure F, I think, was not a failure of the measure. The Measure F was a failure of a campaign. I think that if the community understood that the expansion would have allowed for the road by the high school to be expanded and completed, I think that they probably would have voted for it, because if you look at
You supported it?
Actually, no, I didn't. I did not vote for Measure F because I thought that it would drive down housing prices. And I felt like the timing of the measure was inappropriate. At the time they introduced the measure, the housing market was very, very low. I think that was in 2008. It was one of the worst years for housing market. And they were proposing expansion.
Would you
and
support
more
it today?
more development. Today? Yes, actually I would.
Okay.
You started out with one question and then you switched, and you asked me a very specific question.
Go ahead, Chris.
All right. You asked about, does general plan need more commercial or more residential?
We're gonna come to that.
All right.
And I'm just trying to get, because the ULL just quickly came up, and I'm
All
just
right.
trying to get this cleared, and then we're gonna come back to
All
that.
right, fair enough.
Okay?
Yeah, I'll answer that question. I was generally neutral, but in support, because it has to be expanded eventually.
In support of,
Measure F, as an example of expansion of the urban limit line, because that was originally our land and our general plan in 1999 included that property. The main reason that it needed to be expanded, and the main reason it was even discussed, was to be able to correct the problem we have in our city, which is the most important problem, is American Avenue and the high school and the traffic and the safety there. And because of the county in moving the urban limit line in arbitrarily, they cut our hands off, and we had a school being built that we have no control over as a city that created a traffic problem. So yes, it will have to be done. And even if it did pass, it would still be several years for that to be improved. Beyond the fact that DEIR right now going on with Roddy Ranch and everything else going, we are going to be impacted significantly in Brentwood or in Balfour. And that road is a dangerous road. And it cannot be improved unless the county's going to do it, because it's the county's purview right now.
so you would support Measure F today?
Specifically for those reasons.
Okay, thank you. Gene?
Heritage High School, being with the school district is an issue. It's an island out there. I would be in favor of some accommodation to provide for safety of traffic and our students. How far we would carry that urban limit line, I don't know. I believe as a city council person, our role is to represent feelings of our constituents and what they're feeling, and they've spoken on Measure F. So my position is probably more in line with neutral, that I'd like to see a partial urban limit line at this point, yes, to take care of the nightmare that's happening at Heritage High School. We've tried to remediate. We have new traffic signals, partnership with the city and the school district coming in. That will help alleviate some of the traffic, but will not solve the issue. There's only one way in and one way out on American Avenue right now. And that becomes a real safety issue. If there ever was a calamity, ever was an emergency, how do we vacate over 3,000 students and staff out of that area? So I think that's critical to look at that in that context. I think the economy would demand at some point, I think we need to infill first we have land available inside now, but I think at some point, yes, we will need to consider expanding urban limit line, if not only just for the safety of the students and staff at Heritage and at Adams Middle School.
In that area?
In that.
To deal with the safety?
Safety.
Safety only?
Both safety and the students, that's my primary concern.
Okay. So let's go back to where we were before we lost track of all this here.
Back where you
Yeah. Okay, so.
bad.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm sorry, Chris. I believe we left off.
You were asking about the general plan and the relative allocation
Yeah,
between
right.
commercial and
Thank you.
residential. Clearly, commercial is the predominant, should be the predominant emphasis in a rewrite of the general plan. Brentwood is fundamentally a bedroom community. We've done a lot to bring a lot of commercial growth out there with the streets of Brentwood and the like. But we need to bring more commercial, and we need to be able to put together larger parcels to allow the larger business park uses. I don't think we want industry. So that would clearly be the predominant, I think, issue in the general plan. Want to just talk about the whole growth thing. My point about the growth is if elements of the budget are built on that growth and we don't have the growth, then we're going to have to deal with the budget issues and the decline in budget issues. Growth pays for a lot of infrastructure that's needed, both existing and for the new uses. Do I think that it pays all of the cost? No, we should probably fix that. But, you know, it's just not an open checkbook, because at some point, your development fees push the ability to develop housing just out of the market as compared to other cities, and developers will simply go elsewhere. I'm not saying that to advocate for more development. I'm just saying that that's a realistic assessment of the market. We're gonna have to deal with it whether we like it or not. Not quite a minute, but close.
Pardon?
Not quite a minute, but close.
I appreciate it, Chris.
This is a very interesting question, because it's one of the questions that compelled me to run for city council. When they were discussing putting the big box store on the Scortino Ranch property, it went back to the planning commission, and I read very carefully from page 1 to page 250, the end of the general plan, because I wanted to see if, you know, we legally could exclude this big box store. And there's provision in the general plan for fit and feel. And so I brought this to the planning commissioner, Weber's, the head commissioner, to his attention that this doesn't fit our general plan. And his response to that was, well, I haven't read the general plan, so I wouldn't know. And my feeling on this is, okay, you couldn't make a decision. You had to say that you would not vote yay or nay on an issue because you haven't read the general plan. And you couldn't, you know, you haven't done your due diligence, and our city council appointed him into that position. It felt like a huge slap in the face to the community.
Carissa, but where my question to
Right.
you has to do with
Okay.
the balancing in the future.
So-
It wasn't about Walnut.
So, okay, that's
Okay,
fair,
okay.
and I don't want to minimize your question, okay? So, if you read our current general plan, the way it's written, our residential growth was supposed to be 3% per year. Instead, between, I think, 1998 and 2007, it was 11%. And it was supposed to, the business sector was supposed to grow alongside the residential sector, so that Brentwood wouldn't be this bedroom community that Chris has described. So the idea was never to have a bedroom community. The idea was never to have commuter roads that are so crowded that it takes an hour and a half to get to your destination that should only take you 45 minutes to get to.
Okay, so going forward,
So going forward, I feel like absolutely we need to put emphasis on our business sector, and we must build with the vision, okay? We have to have a vision that helps us grow in a way that is sustainable. And, you know, you can
so
hear
your
this.
priority would be on business development.
Absolutely, and sustainability,
Okay.
and vision, and community.
Tom?
In 1999, I was working on the general plan, and I actually was involved strictly between that time, 2000, 2002, or 2001, I was a planning commissioner, and I know it intimately. I'm on that committee now to do the new update. In my opinion, and what needs to be understood is that when you write a general plan, it's a general direction of where we want to go in the land planning. We, as a city, since this has been talked about, and I'm going to touch on it, have the residential going on. We set up a residential growth management program, and we stopped the development and slowed it down because it was getting out of control. When a city reaches 30,000 population,
So residential development.
residential development. When a city reaches a 30,000 population, generally retail comes. And that's when you have to start working on your commercial so that you can work towards build out. And that's just a general rule of 30,000 people. And we were fortunate enough to have the foresight to start working on that retail. That is why our city did not have a loss in sales tax. As a matter of fact, as AVs went down, our sales tax rates went up because we were able to get the retail going. Right now, our city in this current general plan has a lack of industrial based upon, I think it's Gruen and Gruen or whoever these economists are. That says that, and that's part of balancing our growth.
Is industrial.
We need more industrial because we're under allocated for industrial size. But I don't know that that city or our city is gonna be one that's gonna actually do a lot of industrial. So we need to work on commercial and business. What I'd ideally like to see is a camp, like a campus environment.
By commercial and business, you're talking including industrial, right?
Including industrial.
Okay.
Actually, we just did the Brentwood general plan, again, the specific plan on Brentwood Boulevard,
Mhm.
and that includes core, which is commercial, office, industrial.
I
residential.
just wanted to make sure you weren't drawing a distinction there, that's.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
No,
Okay.
it's more broad. But,
Okay.
you know, we've cut our feet off, our hands off in some cases because I love doing the agricultural stuff. I love putting land in perpetuity. Those are all good things. But we also have, by losing our urban limit line on the south side of our town, gotten rid of or delayed the opportunity for us to get a large business center, so to speak.
By losing.
Well, because we don't have the campus environment. We ended up doing some ag.
By losing the urban limit line vote.
Long time, no.
Okay.
Prior to that, back in 2006 or so, when they adjusted it up and they moved it. Because our sphere of influence goes out to the Vasco, out to Marsh Creek Road. And that stuff there, what we did is, actually Eric was on that committee with me when we did the.
So you're saying by bringing the urban limit line in, you lost some land that could have been used?
For commercial
I'm
development.
sorry, okay.
Yeah, and
I
just
didn't
for the large-
understand when you're saying by losing the urban limit line.
I'm just trying to keep it.
Okay.
But in some of the commercial value we've lost, and we've tried to do that. That's part of what the current general plan is gonna be. We need to have the sustainability, and the sustainability comes from the business. And it's not just retail and everything. There has to be things like manufacturing, whether they're small or not. And we've got those companies moving into our city now.
Okay. Gene?
I've been part of the Brentwood community for 22 years, so I've seen the growth, I've seen what's happened. We have a large growth in homes, which also brought retail, which brought service industry. I think the general plan emphasis now needs to be on business, and businesses that bring high-paying jobs. I think that's what the emphasis needs to be on. Certainly housing brings in infrastructure, but so does businesses. We have a vast majority of our population that is commuting, both on Highway 4 and going down the bypass, Vasco Road. I think that needs to be the priority of the general plan. Bring in businesses so that our people can work where they live and not in just service industry. If we just build more houses and build more retail and more service industries, those are low-paying jobs. That cannot sustain a household family. We need high-paying business jobs in our community so that our residents will not have to commute, that they can find the jobs and work here.
Thank you for the clear, succinct answer. Okay, sustainability, let's start with Eugene. Fiscal sustainability is, you know. Going back up a little bit, your notes. I believe it was Eric talked about the liability, our expenses are higher than our revenues for the next 7 years. And I believe Bob talked about pension liability issues. Could you guys each talk about the fiscal sustainability of the city and talk about especially the unfunded liabilities issues and how you see them, what the unfunded liability issues you see are, and how you see they should be addressed, starting with you, Jim.
First, dealing with the fiscal aspect, yes, it's the old adage, if this isn't a rainy day, when is it? You know, we have that rainy day, we have 30% reserve. We are negative spending. Many public agencies and schools, et cetera, are doing that currently. So I feel the city's done a good job at that, but we can't keep.
At what?
At keeping public safety fully funded, as you said, not laying off people, keeping staff so that we can sustain those jobs in our community. However, there's concern we can't keep negative spending much longer. And so, and part of that's the unfunded liability. I want to applaud the police for their efforts in working with the city when they worked on their pension reform plan and coming up with a tier 2. I thought that was excellent. I think we need to look at the other city employees as well for pensions, because pensions is a long time liability for everyone.
Didn't you just get a second here for the other city?
Yeah, we just did.
2 years ago.
2, that's right, yeah.
Okay.
So I think that, applaud that's a good move in the right direction.
Okay, and what do you see as the unfunded liabilities?
Probably, I think just coming up with what city struggled with, and always as he struggles with, is the maintenance of what we have, being able to maintain and keep our parks as cost increase, maintain our infrastructure as things break. Those are things you need to budget for, that are going to do, whether it be hardware, staffing, computers. If you don't fund for those, and you don't have them in your budget, and our city currently does that in city, but those are the difficulties and
Okay.
challenges.
Okay. Bob, since you raised the unfunded liabilities, I'm gonna come back to you last on this. Carissa, what do you see as the unfunded liabilities, and what do you see as the sustainability issues fiscally going forward?
Okay, well, I'm not an accountant, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a political science major. But when I look at the budget, I can see that we're negative deficit spending. So we're dipping into our current savings account this year by $500,000. Next year, I'm told that we're not going to dip into our savings account, and that's based on projection of housing development at 3%. And then the following year, we're projected to dip into our savings account $2 million, so on and so forth. I understand that we do finally balance at 10 years. So in terms of unfunded liabilities, my understanding on this is the pensions tend to be larger than sometimes the salaries and go on for a lifetime. And well, that just simply put, it's not fiscally responsible, and it's something that we're going to have to work on. I think that if you're going to work on pension reform, you also have to work on salary reform as well. So some of the upper echelon of our staff make upwards of $200,000 a year, and that needs to be, scrutinized. So those are, if you want to talk about cutting, that's what you have to look at. And I'm hoping that we choose to cut in areas that don't harm our public safety, that keep our community intact, and with thoughtfulness of the community that we've built.
Chris?
Well, people keep saying that we're spending more than we take in. The city has a 10-year fiscal model, which was pointed out by the grand jury as one that other cities ought to follow. Over the 10-year fiscal model is based upon a lot of different assumptions. And over the 10-year time period, we are maintaining our 30% reserves. So in the long run, we're not overspending. We did set up funds to cover some of these shortfalls, and we're not talking about the reserve, we're talking about separate funds to cover some of these labor issues. So I kind of, I understand the statement within a year or two that may be correct, but the long run, that's not correct. We are fiscally and financially stable, assuming that the assumptions that it was based upon remain accurate. Now, with regard to the pension funds, we have adjusted some of our setting up a tier 2, and we've also begun a 10-year glide path to pay down that unfunded liability. It wasn't created overnight. It's not going to go away overnight, but we are working towards that. It's not a situation where we are continuing to add to the unfunded liability.
Eric?
Unfunded liabilities. We deal with, well, first off, we made adjustments in 2010 with our miscellaneous employees going to the second tier. In 2012, we made adjustments with our public safety.
You made adjustments, I'm sorry, with your,
Negotiations with our public safety.
with miscellaneous in 2000.
Miscellaneous in 2010
Right.
for the pension, which is just retirement.
Mhm.
And in 2012, we made adjustments with our public safety for pension, OPEB, and medical. In 2012, we made adjustments.
With public safety for
Pension,
pension,
OPEB, and medical, current medical. In 2012, we did medical and OPEB with miscellaneous. So we've done all three of those line item expenses with both employee bargaining groups. It adjusted our trend line in the future significantly, and it was a good first step in the right direction. Are we done? We're obviously not done.
With a trend line of your normal costs?
Trend line of what our costs were prior to the adjustments.
Okay.
So
But going forward.
our expense trend line over that 10-year fiscal model went from this to this.
Mhm.
And so we've gotten it a lot flatter than what it was, and it's a step in the right direction. Are we there? We're not there.
Did you reduce OPEB benefits for current employees?
For current employee, for retirees,
No, for current employees.
we didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And for current employees, their OPEB gets capped at what the negotiation was. So for miscellaneous, it's the current cap, which is the current medical cost, which I think is $1,260. And for public safety, in lieu,
So it's
they
tied to
gave
current
something.
employees.
They gave something back, and so they're at $1,500 is what their medical and their OPEB's capped at. And then for our new employees, the OPEB is $122.
So I guess my question is it tied, is your OPEB is it tied to current employees?
Our-
To current medical?
Our OPEB for retirees is
Tied.
tied to current medical.
Okay.
Our OPEB for current employees is tied to their cap. And that cap increases once the Kaiser single employee reaches the cap and starts to go over it. And then that cap increases with that number. And then our OPEB is the minimum of the 122 for new employees. So there's kind of three tiers.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, so going forward, then what do you see as the unfunded liabilities?
I think we have an issue with our pensions, obviously. They're obviously not fully funded. I think our ballpark number is 22-ish, 25-ish million, and that always for our pensions. And
For
that-
everyone?
For our miscellaneous. Our public safety's pooled, and so that's a tough one to extrapolate out and
Right.
really get a hard number for it. And so we have to deal with that. The only benefit that you have is you have some assets set aside for that one, so it's going to continue to grow. And so that's of the concerning ones. It's obviously a big concern, but to me, it's not the most important concern right now. Although it's on the radar, we have to manage our pensions, and I think philosophically we have to get to a point to pay for everything that we promise. I've been a believer of a defined contribution because I think that's where we all need to end up going, or with the concept of we'll write a check today and we don't have any liabilities for that benefit in the future. And if it's a defined benefit and they take the risk, we can talk about that. But we have to get to a point to where we can assume all of the risk for the future benefit if somebody in the state of California and Sacramento is wrong about the formulas that they use.
You said we can or can't?
We cannot.
Okay.
We cannot. I don't think it's fiscally responsible to take on that liability. Our OPEB really concerns me. Our OPEB unfunded liability is probably pushing $30 million. Chris and I were on the committee a few years ago that recommended to put in place to get to an 85% funding of that. So we started it. It's still loose on how much of that we get to, but it was a 10-year plan to get to 85% of funding that ARC. Our actual required contribution, I think, is around the $4 million range, and we're not there. We're about a third there, depending on the year, and that's the number that just started to show up on our fiscal model that is played with a little bit. If we
Okay.
don't have enough money, we might not fund it. If we have enough money, we'll fund it. Point being is we're making this promise year in and year out, and we're not funding it. And at some point, that bill comes due, and we need to be able to manage that. We made a big adjustment with our long-term trend with the negotiations and taking and readjusting that second and third tier, but we still have to manage our year in and year out budget to pay for those promises that we've given. And there's gonna be some pain. We go back to that budget and some of those developments and how fast things go forward. One of the departments that we struggle with at the city is community development, which is expenses over revenue by $2 million. How long do you continue to support that? How long do you move forward with that? At some point, you have to start to adjust those red numbers to get your whole budget to a black and actually pay for these liabilities that are being accumulated every year.
Let me let Bob weigh in now. Since you raised this issue,
Everything's already been touched on. I have no ammo here. A couple things. One is, I'll touch on the budget just right off the bat. Back during my original term, my first term, we actually set up a budget stabilization fund. We set up an insurance, an emergency awareness or emergency preparedness fund. Those are two funds that we set aside as extra money outside of our budgets, our 30% reserve, to help us in times of dire need. That's part of what stabilized our stuff now, our budget now, as opposed to dipping into our general, budget, our reserve. So I will tend to agree that it'd be nice if we didn't have to deal with PERS as our basis for all of our retirement benefits. If we could come up with some other type of plan, it would be ideal. I don't know how that's going to change. When we just did our second tier stuff and we went to, I think it's 2% at 60 for our miscellaneous employees and 3% at 55, I think it is, for our police. Those are the only choices we had. And it made it very difficult because, and we were one of the first cities to do it, and it's always hard to be in the lead, but we had to do it because we just are unfunded. I think it's somewhere.
you could have done it 2 at 50.
We could have done 2 at 50, but rather than that, we thought we'd get to a higher rate or higher age because of the lifespan issues. So theoretically, if somebody retires at 55,
2 at 50 is the equivalent of 2.7 at 55, which is less than 3 at 55.
and that's about what I think we're at 2 point. No, we're at 2 point.
Yeah.
But and you're throwing numbers out that I wouldn't even be able to figure out. The real issue though is we need to catch up. We're trying to fund 85%. I think this year we paid our 800,000 and we added another 800,000 because we were able to. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't even think our governor knows what the answer is. It's a very difficult one, and there's going to be a lot smarter people than me that are going to figure out how it's going to be done, and I'd like to see what those ideas are. And I'm willing to make the decision. It's a tough decision. I was involved in the employee layoffs. I was involved in making all this stuff come together, and it's stuff that had to happen. And financial problems are really difficult to deal with. And we made promises, and some of those promises we have to, if at all possible, keep. But that's why we made a change for the future. And then, what was the other one you had asked originally? The other part of that question.
Well, I think, and let me ask you, because you seem to know some, 3 of you seem to be around during that time. Can someone explain to me the thinking of the 85% on OPEB?
Why we got to the 85%?
And why 10 years out you would only fund 85% of your ARC?
Instead of the 100%?
Yeah.
I think it's the good first step. We were funding zero. We were pay as you go. And it's a big...
I mean, let's be clear. We're not talking about between now and then you're accruing more unfunded liability.
Accruing liability every
And
year.
after that, at 85%, you're still accruing liability of 15%, right?
It's very simple. You have to have enough money to run the city. So if you're going to go to 100%, you're going to bankrupt the city. There simply wasn't enough money to do it. So we had to try and make the best shot we could at that point.
And it's a shock. I think the numbers that we were looking at was $5 million, and we're trying to get to that point to where we fund a good portion of it.
What's the difference between 85% and 100% in 2017?
As far as value for that particular
Cost,
for that
yeah.
for that single year,
Yeah.
$2 million.
$2 million.
Yeah.
So in 2017, it would have bankrupted the city to not keep going deeper in debt.
No, I
No,
think,
no, that's not what I said.
Okay.
What I said was trying to get to 100% would have bankrupted the city currently to try and set aside the funds to cover all of that.
I don't think
Right, but that's not my question. My question
Well, I don't think that
why
we're-
didn't you aim for 100% in 2017?
I don't think that we were going to stop at 85%. I think we're going to get to 100% because we have to get to 100%. The 85% concept was a good portion of ours goes into a trust, and once it's in there, you can't get it out. So we didn't want to overfund that, depending on what some of those returns are, because if we overfunded it, we couldn't have used it for other priorities that we might have needed at the time. So we need to get to 100%. The 85% goes into a trust fund that we can't touch, so we can't take it back out. So we can't give it to the savings account and take it back out and use it for a rainy day. So that was the purpose behind the 85%. We all know we have to get to 100% plus, because the plus has to pay for the previous years that we've all kicked down the road. And it's going to take a long time to dig out of this hole. It's not a simple, quick hole to fix.
But also understanding that 85% can be adjusted. It's one of those adjustments within our budget that can be changed. But we're budgeting based upon very, very conservative numbers. As an example, our revenues are based on very conservative numbers. And we're exceeding our revenues. I believe every year that we've been doing this, we've exceeded what we forecasted, and we kept within budget. We're under budget in our spending. So we're doing our best to balance that. But it has to be done, yes, but it's our forecast to be realistic and conservative. That's the best that we can look at.
Anything else we missed here?
There's a lot more.
I know, I'm sure there is,
You could
but-
go on forever.
but-
I think Brentwood, with the amount of growth that we've had, and I think everybody here agrees, that the planning that was done in the previous 10 and 12 years that I can't take credit for, they did a tremendous job in setting up the structure that we have. The LLDs, the CFDs, the different pots of money that politicians can't touch and we can't just juggle around. And so we're always going to have that beautiful community, which at the basis of it is going to keep our property values up. I think we were aggressive in moving forward with layoffs early on. I think that the structure of the city is in place to outlast all of us. And I think that's the greatest part about it. We don't want to screw it up. And I don't think we are going to screw it up. And we're going to get into arguments. Chris and I get into them all the time when we were up there. And we're going to continue to get into them because we just think differently. But that's why we ended up on a lot of committees together. And the 85% was one of the committees we ended up on. The Civic Center Financing Plan was another committee we ended up on. We never gave a recommendation as a committee because we couldn't agree. But that was the fun of the way our city has been planned and managed. So we were able to have an insurance fund. We're able to have a budget stabilization fund. We're able to have our facilities and equipment replacement fund fully funded, based on our depreciation schedule. I think it's about $10 million in it. So that interest comes back into the general fund to help us. But we can replace the vehicles when we need to replace the vehicles. We can make the right decisions because we have some cash to make the right decisions. We're not just subject to living hand to mouth and making sure that we get those development permits. They're going to be a part of our system because housing is going to be a part of that general plan element, and it's going to happen as the market drives whatever elements it looks like in the next 10 or 15 years. We're still going to have to make those adjustments. But I want to, and I do it often, thank the previous 15 years for kind of setting the structure, because it's allowed us to, I think, be in a phenomenal position considering what has happened in the last 4 and 5 years.
Well, and I just want to make one more comment on that. I want to make sure that we don't rest on our laurels. We have a lot more work to do. I don't want the city to become complacent about where it is, because it is a nice, attractive community. Nice, attractive communities, all of a sudden, 25 years down the road, can be nice, attractive, old communities. We still have to reinvest in our infrastructure and our facilities and our city to maintain that beauty that we have now, because it is going to wear out in the future, and we need to start planning now to make sure that we don't become a Rust Belt city that we see across the Midwest so often.
Oh, not since Boo Bob moved into your town, you're not gonna have any of that.
Big spender.
Yeah. He's probably gonna float the
He
whole
doesn't come
town.
down from the hill too often.
No, of course not. That's where the wine is.
Folks, thank you very much. I very much appreciate it.